VU Campus Radio. Learn, live, listen. VU Campus Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Connective, a NEWConnective podcast in which we discuss life sense and nonsense. In this podcast, we discuss topics that are important to students and staff at the VU. Of course, we try to add our own NEWConnective twist. This means talking about topics including the meaning of life, social issues, philosophy, psychology, and many more. We want to stimulate discussion on topics that dominate our day-to-day conversations, but that are not always visible in the public domain. In this edition, we want to discuss an important topic that has been receiving more and more attention recently. But is it receiving the right kind of attention? The topic I'm referring to is femicide. A small trigger warning before we continue. Even though this episode is about femicide, we will refrain from painting a detailed picture of the intensity of violence. We will, however, use sensitive language that might be triggering to some of the audience. Anyway, let me introduce myself. My name is Yonah de Beer, and I have been working at NEWConnective since this summer. The reason I feel called to host this podcast and program is because I have a fairly unusual relationship with the subject of masculinity. One of the reasons for this is that I was raised in a multiple parent family. I was raised by two mothers, and I did know who my fathers were, but they did not really play a prominent role in my upbringing. I was aware from an early age that I was different from most of the children around me. One of my earliest memories is me asking a friend at preschool, "So, what are your mother's names?" And he replied, I only have one mother." To which I replied, "Wow, that's so sad." Even as a young kid, I always had a different perception of what it means to be a man or to act masculine. And it was rarely something I could relate to. My friends would always ask me which of my moms was the man in the relationship. And even though one of my moms grew up in a sports-dominated family, I was never raised with a competitive spirit. I just wanted to do well, and that didn't necessarily mean winning. In this podcast, I am joined by Cato Benschop. I have known her since my philosophy studies. Cato is a philosopher and illustrator. Her research into eating disorders received international attention, and in 2023, she was awarded with the prestigious Fiep Westendorp Award for her illustrations on the philosophy of psychiatry. One of the reasons I invited her is because she is part of the revival of the Dolle Minas. In this role, she helps forward the women's emancipation movement in the Netherlands, about which she reports in her feminist newsletter Beeldspraak. For those listening who don't know what the Dolle Minas are, I was wondering if you could give a little explanation, Cato.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Yonah. So, the Dolle Minas are a feminist action group from the Netherlands. And the Dolle Minas started in the 60s, the end of the 60s. And then the group existed for about 10 years. Then it stopped. And then in the 2013, about that time, it had a short revival. But now, in 2025, we started again. And there are 5,000 Dolle Minas throughout the country now.
Wow, that's a really big community.
Yeah, and we demonstrate and we organize actions. I wanted to say ludiek. It's a Dutch word that means like a bit funny or humoristic actions concerning all kinds of topics that relate to the position of women.
Yeah, I know the Dolle Minas mostly from pictures of women protesting in the end of the 60s with baas in eigen buik.
Yeah, baas in eigen buik means like to be literally translated means boss in your own belly. Yeah, and that was a demonstration for the right to have abortions, safe abortions and legal abortions.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to include you in this podcast is because of the things that you've been doing with the Dolle Minas, but also because we're part of the same, we were part of the same student community here at the VU. And I wanted to talk about what a student community can do to sort of help the emancipation movement, but also to help maybe men or other groups at this university learn about how they can have a positive effect on a culture that is still very dangerous sometimes, or even alien to women and vulnerable groups of people. So I'm not necessarily speaking about femicide here, but mostly about the male-dominated culture, such as locker room talk, or the idea that you have to be a real man, for example.
The kind of knowledge that you are taught in university.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we talked about this briefly before the conversation, how our experiences were with this, but maybe you could list a few examples of what you remember when we were studying here.
Yeah, I think so. The topic of femicide relates closely to how we engage with each other in everyday interactions. So there is this kind of infographic to explain this. It's called the Pyramid of Violence. I think you know it too, probably.
Yeah, I had a really long part of it about it in the earlier text. That is something I cut out.
Your introduction text. Yeah. So basically, the idea is that at the very pointy part of the pyramid, the top part, there is femicide, the most extreme form of gender-related violence against women. But then at the very base of the pyramid, there's like microaggressions towards women, such as like locker room talk, making sexist jokes, stuff like that, or like talking about a woman's like the looks of a woman in a degrading way, stuff like that. Things we kind of accept because it's sort of like normalized.
Yeah.
But those like small interactions, small behaviors, they kind of mogelijk maken. Enable the more extreme forms of violence.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea. Because if we normalize those things, then it's easier to get to the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, it becomes a slippery slope.
Yeah. So the idea is if we denormalize microaggression, then femicide becomes even more extreme, more difficult to perform.
Sort of a trickle-up thing.
Yeah. But the idea is to target this pyramid from various ways, various ways. So you can do that on a policy level by, for example, strengthening the punishments for femicide. You can do that on a policy level by creating like actions for how masculinity is perceived by the citizens of the Netherlands. You can do that by like demonstrating on the street, but you can also do that by, for example, thinking about how you organize your university, how you organize the building, literally how you organize your classes, what the topics are that are spoken about, like who gets to speak.
That's one of the themes that I'm also hearing in what you're explaining right now, is that it's not only about women or vulnerable groups between brackets, but it's also men that are being sort of held hostage by the system, because how I read into those first two layers of the pyramid is that one is sort of our values as a society. So as a man, you should be this, or you should do that, or look like this.
And as a woman, you should be like serving, feminine.
It becomes sort of the anti-part of being men, almost. So when I introduced myself, I was talking about the competitive spirit. That is something that we sort of cheer on for men. But when a woman becomes too competitive, she's actually punished for that. Yeah,
then she is like an iron woman or a cold woman.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a bitch.
Yeah. And then the layer of the higher than those values, we get to behavior. And the question that I wanted to ask you is, how do you feel, especially within a student society, how could we sort of inspire students to think about those behaviors separated from the extremes that they may lead to, but also within a bigger picture of not necessarily security or safety, but more about equality, about how it reflects on you as a person when you don't allow people to be the same way.
Yeah, I think so. On a university policy level, I sometimes think so. For example, here at the VU, you have philosophy as a course. every student has to do a philosophy course
Mm-hmm.
at this university. And given the importance of emancipation in this country and the position that we're in right now, with like high levels of violence against women and
Mm-hmm.
sexual assault, I think it would not be strange if the university would say, well, we, next to having a mandatory philosophy course, we will do another course on emancipation and social equality.
Mm-hmm.
That's mandatory for all students. That would not be weird. I mean, in companies, they do that too now, right? You
Yeah.
have to do this kind of course, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just if you talk about this like level of behaviors and values, I think it could be very important if there's more room in the university for awareness of which voices are listened to and which are not. So if you talk about assertiveness, at least what I experienced within the university is that loud voices, strong statures, like feet far apart from each other, like presenting, boasting, low voice. That's the kind of like presentation that is highly valued, and that like higher pitched voices, postures that we consider more insecure, such as feet close to each other, legs crossing each other when sitting, that those are less valued. And so, for example, one of my friends is a PhD in a university in the Netherlands, and the PhD women, which is also how they are written to, they're PhD women.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
It's crazy. They get a course on how to get your point across and how to present yourself well. But then the PhD men, they don't get a mail with the message like, do you want to do a course in listening to different voices? And
Dear PhD man, this is how you become more tolerant to other voices in academia.
Yeah. So I think that's for sure, but I think the university also does that. But I think one of the things that people are inclined to do when they want to engage with like social justice issues is that they are try to target the group that is marginalized. But it's of course maybe more important to target the group that engages most frequently in marginalization.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
we've also been speaking mostly within the dichotomy of men and women, even though there's a very big spectrum of gender identities.
Yeah.
But I also feel like that plays a really big role into how society at large, but also within a university, we attribute certain aspects of behavior or looks to how people should behave. So
yeah, for sure.
that sort of queer people break that mold as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And the question that popped into my mind when we were talking, when you spoke last, was that how sort of, for me, I would never have, or I never have really aligned myself with classic views of masculinity, partly because of my upbringing, but also partly because they just don't make sense to me. But I do see that it's very natural for most men or cis men to sort of go along with this. And that when they are asked to change, either by a government or a university or an organization, maybe even their own friends, that it feels like they have to hand in certain rights rather than sort of see that the rights or the way that they've been acting has enabled a culture of inequality in the first place. Do you agree? Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I can also kind of understand, put myself in that position, that if you're sort of like the group that you identify with is being targeted as like a hostile group, and that can be very difficult, or like I can understand that that's a big confrontation. But I also think what plays a role there is that, so maybe if we don't talk about like men and women, we could talk about masculinity and femininity, right?
Yeah.
And there are certain traits and certain ways of talking and behavior that are connected to masculinity, or that are understood as masculine, and some that are standardly understood as feminine. And I think a lot of the traits that kind of constitute masculinity are a negation of femininity, right? So many men identify as men because they are not women, right? I am not a pussy. I am not interested in colors and jolly things. I am not that all women are interested in those things.
No, but I get you.
But I am. I'm not interested in personal stories. I want I want stories about finances and international relations and stuff like that. So I also think that many, or at least in my experience, many men that are asked to kind of make themselves less toxic masculine, that they feel like that's an invitation to become more feminine, which is a problem if you identify as a masculine, because femininity is the juxtaposition, right? Or juxtaposition, like the opposite.
Yeah, so instead of viewing it as a sort of a chasm between toxic masculinity and healthy masculinity, they see masculinity as opposed to femininity.
Yeah,
rather
I
than
noticed
within
that
its
a lot.
own category.
I also with men I engage with personally, when we talk about issues of emancipation, I've heard a lot, like in private conversations, that they say things like, "Yeah, but am I then still a man? If I don't do this and that, if I do more household chores, if I am very interested in things that I'm not interested in now, am I then still a man?"
I'm curious, but that's a whole conversation apart from this, why certain chores or certain interests are being categorized with masculinity or femininity. That just...
That's then you have to look at the history.
Yeah,
right?
but
How
you always have to look at the history.
Yeah, but I think that's an important issue, and I think it also helps the emancipation movement if some of the traits that are considered feminine are also kind of marketed as also masculine.
Yeah,
because that also invites a certain group to kind of soften up.
Yeah, for me, a famous example of how this can be sort of quite ironic and almost funny is how, like within the capitalist example of Coca-Cola, they weren't able to market Cola Light to men, so they had to create Cola Zero. Yeah. And then after a while, Cola Light disappeared because...
Cola Zero was more valued.
Yeah, and there was no need for it because it was virtually the same.
Yeah.
Even though it started off as Cola Zero or Light. And the same with, I think, Heineken Silver, which was both created to earn more, but also to create a beer for women because it supposedly had less calories in there, which is problematic in of itself. But all these sort of, and these are very economic divisions, they enforce that opposition between masculinity and femininity.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, this is just really strange because I have a younger brother and he identifies as a man. He's a cis heterosexual man, and even though I don't necessarily identify myself as such, we still have a lot of similarities because we were both raised by two mothers. And I feel like even though he is in all ways of the word a man, he does behave very differently. He is very rational.
You mean different than the standard masculine type? Yeah.
So
but that's also sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, go ahead.
It's a podcast. I think that's also an issue that many, I mean, not your brother, but that many people who think of themselves as very progressive still can behave in ways that are can still behave in toxic masculine ways, like, right? Even though you identify with a certain group, it doesn't mean that all your behavior, all your traits automatically align with the traits that are associated with that group.
I think that we're now drifting into a part that's mostly centered around gender, which is also very important to understand, like the behaviors and attitudes in the pyramids of violence. I want to sort of revisit the part where I spoke about the influence of events such as the murder of Lisa last summer on the student community. I remember that when I started studying here at the VU, there were a few newspaper articles and I think Parool about a series of rapes in the Vondelpark, which really caught my eye because I just moved to the city. And
when that happened.
Yeah, when that happened. And I really wanted to sort of make a difference and also sort of felt as if like we were all responsible to create a safe place. And I think similar things happened when Lisa was murdered, that a lot of people started focusing on, okay, what can I do? And then the government said, like, let's legalize pepper spray.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's something, this carceral attitude, right? Like that everything that goes wrong must be punished. Or that's, I think, a standard reaction. Wow, it's way better to focus on the prevention, I think, or maybe a combination between the two, yeah.
And how would you focus on the prevention within the scope of the university, and not necessarily university policies, but even like a intro week organizations, new students arrive in the university, how would you talk to them about topics involving consent, safety?
I think it's, so again, this is something you can approach from so many angles, right? So I think it's, first of all, very important that as a university you make very clear on different occasions that this unaccepted behavior is priority, right? That you're focusing as a university on contributing to the elimination of that kind of behavior in our society in every way the university can. I think that's important to signal that. But next to that, I think, so for example, now in the straatindeling, like the openbare indeling.
Public space.
Yes, public space.
design.
So there's a lot of focus on public space for this, how public space design can enable the safety of women also in the evening. But then a lot of focus is on how public space can make sure can help, how the design of public space can help women feel safer in situations that are already not so safe. For example, with a lot of lightning on the street, or a lot of lights on the street, and maybe flight routes and stuff like that. But I think for the prevention of this kind of horrible behavior and sexual assault and violence against women, it's very important to make sure that all public spaces are also catered towards women, right? So not only that the street is kind of safe in cases of emergency, or that the university is safe in case of emergency, but to make university more a feminine space, or a space that is also there for women. And you could focus on the way that the university is designed, like the bathrooms and stuff like that. But you can also focus on the kind of knowledge that is transmitted to students. You could focus on citing in your papers, like the most cited articles are articles by men. You can focus on women authors, female figures in history, like diversifying the curriculum.
Yeah,
I think those are very important things for women also to feel this world is also mine, and nobody is allowed to take that away from me.
Yeah, I feel like that's a theme that extends to all marginalized groups, where it doesn't become a discussion about, but also discussion with. So you enable women in this example, or queer people, or any marginalized group to sort of feel as if they have ownership over public space. Is that what you're hinting at?
Yeah, I think ownership, but I would say that ownership comes after designing the space and the curriculum such that it targets these groups.
So
right?
the social design creates how ownership is perceived.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a woman and none of your teachers is a woman, I think it becomes more difficult to think about yourself as having the possibility to also have a teacher role. And the same counts for like so I studied philosophy. A lot of the philosophers we read were male philosophers. Some teachers really tried to focus on that, and then there were a few female authors. And then most of the female authors were in the diversifying philosophy class.
Yeah, I think I can count on two hands how many female philosophers we read in my entire bachelor's.
Right.
Yeah.
And that unconsciously, I think, does something to the position of women and marginalized groups in the university. So those are kind of, if you want to focus on small things that are not directly connected to violence, I think those alterations, those changes ultimately shift the position of women in a group, in a social or cultural group.
Yeah. So I still get the feeling that even though these changes in attitude and behavior also start from the bottom up, it's also really a message that the university itself needs to send within policy, but also within the classroom, so that people feel enabled or empowered to move in a way that they want to.
Yeah, and also if the university says, this is an issue for us, please, if you have any ideas, come to us. We are going to try to make it happen. Then you feel invited, I think, to do something about it. Well, if the university doesn't say anything about it, then you have to be the one to like, hey, please,
Yeah, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, and she works at another university as part of the intro week committee, and she told me that they tell all the mentors of the groups to have a conversation about topics like consent, going out, how flirting and attraction works when you're drunk or under the influence of other things. And the discussion sort of went to a point where I was like, do you feel like that is right? Because then it still becomes sort of an individual issue, like how it used to be with sex education, that they were like, oh yeah, every family needs to discuss that for themselves, but then you have like complete different stories in each group, rather than in the entrance speech, the rector magnificus says, your safety is an issue for us.
Yeah.
So do you feel like...
I think both are important, right? But I think that
equally necessary.
Equally necessary, but I think also, what could be more powerful, a more powerful message than introducing a course for each student of this university about social equality and how we can engage in making that happen. Then you really say this is a priority for us, right?
Yeah.
And also for a university, that would be a logical thing to do because it's a university. Here you teach things. And I think it's also very important if there are courses available for men that kind of want to engage with this issue but don't know how.
Yeah. I think this is also something that we spoke about when I called you about this podcast, which is something that I want to sort of briefly address now. It's the question of language.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in different things, but when you said designing a course for every student, I was thinking about, okay, so you could call that a course about social justice, for example, but then there's a problem that most people perceive courses in universities to be theoretical rather than practical. Oh, I'm going to make a change in the world. This is something I have to write a paper about. This is not something I'm going onto the streets to protest for or against.
But I do feel like knowledge is power. I really do believe in that. I mean, without some conceptual knowledge about how all kinds of inequality and onderdrukking, oppression are linked to each other, it's very difficult to even see or experience what's happening if you are part of a marginalized group, or to experience or perceive what you are doing if you are actively kind of suppressing or dominating a person from another social group. So I think ultimately you need to practice that, but it's also important to know something about it.
I feel like maybe there's just a personal tension for me there also with regards to other social issues that of course you learn a lot and there's great professors here, but I don't feel like there's a culture within most universities where they're like, okay, now let's go use this and create something in the real world. It's mostly about now read this and write a paper.
Let's speak about it. Yeah, but I think, of course, like the connection between policy and information is super important. So if you give a course about that, and for example, in the course you give attention to how much women are listened to, for example, or how much speech time they are given, then it's important that in other classes you also actually do that, right? So that, for example, as a not everyone will agree with this kind of strategy, but there are multiple strategies possible. But for example, that every time a man has spoken, that you now say, well, and now it's time for a woman to ask a woman to ask a question.
Yeah, so to literally implement that in the next few classes as well.
Yeah, or to make sure that speech time is divided equally, to give women a bit more time to think about their questions, or to motivate them extra to ask their question, because I also know this from my own experience, many women are like sitting, for example, in the class thinking about, I have to ask this question, but is it a good question? Should I phrase it differently? How should I phrase it? And then in the meantime, 3 guys have already put up their hand, like, I have a question, or I have something to say about this, debate me, you know? So, and of course, it's a bit dangerous, because if you talk about these kind of policy interventions, you kind of have to talk in dichotomies between men and women. But yeah, it's a reality we live in.
Yeah. The other part of the language question is that we talk a lot about marginalized groups or safety or vulnerability, but those words also create the sense that we're essentially talking about victims and not perpetrators, or not the entire population. Is there a better way to talk about these things, or different words that we could use to? Yeah, I keep using the word ownership, but I feel like, or agency, maybe autonomy. How do we generate autonomy for people that are faced with dominant male
structural
culture?
Inequality.
Yeah, structural inequality.
Yeah, I never use the word vulnerability or vulnerable groups. Like, I mean, I now just use the word marginalized, but I also try to circumvent that word, actually, because I in general, I feel like, but that's also from my experience in the philosophy of psychiatry, I feel like it's very important to describe as much as possible what you're actually hinting at. Abstract words and concepts are important. But for example, if you talk about women as a marginalized group, it's very difficult then to know from this one word, like, but by whom are they marginalized? How are they marginalized? Why is it marginalization? So I think it's important to, for example, speak about a society in which masculinity has supremacy, you know? That makes it clearer, I think. But I'm not against using these words, but I could also imagine that, at least for myself, I don't like to think of myself as belonging to a vulnerable group. Like, vulnerable in the sense that women experience a lot of violence. Most women experience a lot of violence during their lifetime, but not vulnerable in the sense that we are a group with little agency or power, or, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a very important distinction that you make.
Yeah.
As a last question, I think we already sort of answered this, but maybe you could phrase it as advice for the listeners that are part of this university or other universities. How could student communities or young people in general contribute to a safer existence, or more, safer existence within the university, but also society at large?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is in targeting social injustice and inequality is that, at least for this topic, for like men and women, I think it's very important, if you are a male student, that you actively try to listen to women. And that doesn't only mean giving them more speech time, but actually processing what they are saying, inquiring into what they are experiencing, asking questions about their lives, their weekends, probably like they do with you too, right? So I think that plays a very important role in distributing authority. And I think it also plays a very important role in women feeling safe enough and empowered enough to share the experiences that were stigmatized and that we hid for so long. I think many women tend to also protect other men from their bad experiences because they are ashamed of it, or because they are afraid that the man will think of something about it, or that they feel targeted, So I think that's very important if you are a male student. Listen, please, right? And not that kind of debate me attitude. It's, please stop doing that. And for the women, I would say, try to take up some space and stand for it if you can, and also try to motivate other women and girls to do that. I think many things start from there, from distributing speech time, distributing interest.
Yeah.
And for teachers, I would say, try to artificially implement the distribution of speech time in your classes.
Okay.
I think that happens very little. Yeah.
I think it's great advice for a lot of parties here in the university.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I could give all other kinds of advice, like a place where you can share your experiences, a trust person, or but those things are kind of in place.
Yeah. I think what has been a big takeaway for me in this conversation and is that it's both necessary as individual students, but also as a community to start behaving differently towards each other, to give and take up space, but also for the organization of the university to not only sort of recognize the problems, but also recognize that there is a part for them in solving it, and to create healthier policy that ultimately will help students create space for one another and to not go through this loop again with another generation, so to speak.
Yeah, I think in this country there's a lot of focus on free speech. So everyone has to be able to do their say and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's of course important, but the question is, like, how is free speech exercised now, and how is it preventing other people from speaking freely?
Yeah, so what does it contribute to what you're saying? Or do you mean it in a different way?
Well, I think free speech can be very important. It can be very important, it is very important, free speech, and it's important that everyone can, like, voice their opinion or their view. But free speech is something you have to kind of divide. It's not something that happens naturally. Not every group is feels free to speak, is free to speak. So you have to kind of intervene in that to make free speech happen. It's not a natural given, I think,
No, I think it's a big privilege to feel as if you're naturally
free to speak.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that the other listeners are as motivated as I am to create change within the walls of the university.
Yeah, we focused a lot on one particular part, I think, but...
Is there something else that you want to talk about?
No, not particularly. I think it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really happy to do this podcast with you.
Thank you, same, Yonah.
Yeah. This was the first part of the series on femicide, focusing on the first 2 layers of male behavior. I want to invite the audience to send a message if they have any questions or if they wish to help with this program. NEWConnective will host events in the coming year, and we want to give ownership to as many people as possible, so please reach out. Thank you, Cato.
Thank you, Yonah.
And I'm also inspired by the work that you do with the Dolle Minas, and I hope that everybody looks up the Dolle Minas when they listen to this.
Yeah, and please sign up if you feel like you want to join. You're welcome.
We need 5,000 more.
We need 5,000 more.
Exactly. My name is Yonah de Beer, and this was the first event of the NEWConnective's Femicide program. Keep an eye on our socials for more promotion and programs about this very important topic. This was The Connective, and see you next time.